The air in the velvet lounge smelled of imported cigars, expensive whiskey, and old money. It was the most exclusive club in Seoul, a playground where politicians shook hands with gangsters and secrets were traded like currency. Seo Jun sat in the deepest corner of the VVIP balcony. He did not mingle. He did not smile. He sat with the stillness of a predator waiting for the wind to shift. His suit was Italian, black as midnight, tailored to hide the gun holstered beneath his left arm and the intricate ink that stained his skin. His men stood at the perimeter, stone-faced, but Seo Jun wasn't looking at them, nor was he looking at the trembling businessman waiting to ask him for a favor. His dark, cold eyes were fixed on the floor below. She was there. Amelia. She moved through the crowded bar like a queen in exile. In a sea of pale skin and cosmetic surgery, she was a striking anomaly. Her skin was deep, rich mahogany, glowing under the purple neon lights. She was tall, her legs long and elegant even in the uncomfortable uniform skirt. Seo Jun took a slow sip of his whiskey, the ice clinking against the glass. He had been coming here every night for 6 months. He owned the building, the land, and the debts of half the patrons, but the only asset he cared about was the woman carrying a tray of cocktails on the lower level. He watched a man try to flag her down aggressively. Seo Jun's hand tightened around his glass, the knuckles turning white. The dragon tattoo on his chest burned beneath his shirt. "Boss," his lieutenant Kai whispered, noticing the shift in Seo Jun's aura. "Not yet," Seo Jun murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated with suppressed violence. "Let her work." "Amelia, faster, table 6 waiting 10 minutes. Amelia gritted her teeth, forcing a polite smile onto her face as Mr. Bong barked orders at her. He was a nervous, sweaty little man who treated the waitstaff like cattle. "I'm going, Mr. Bong," she said, her voice calm despite the exhaustion dragging at her bones. She balanced the tray effortlessly, weaving through the throng of bodies. Seoul was a beautiful city, but it could be lonely. Being a tall, black woman in Korea meant she stuck out everywhere she went. She was used to the stares, some curious, some hostile, some filled with a hunger that made her skin crawl. She dropped the drinks at table 6, dodging a wandering hand from a drunken salaryman. She hated this place. She hated the pretension, the smoke, and the way the men in the VVIP section looked down at everyone like they were gods. Especially the one in the shadows. She felt it again, that prickle on the back of her neck. Someone was watching her, not just glancing, but watching. She glanced up toward the darkened balcony, but the glass was tinted. Just 2 more hours, she whispered to herself. She needed the tips, her rent was overdue, and Patrick wasn't helping much lately. Her boyfriend was sweet, a laid-back Jamaican guy she'd met at a frantic expat party, but his laid-back attitude was starting to look a lot like laziness. He was always between jobs, leaving Amelia to hustle. She sighed, wiping down the bar. She missed the warmth of home, but she was trapped in the neon lights, working for a boss she despised, unaware that the owner of the city was memorizing the rhythm of her breathing. The office was soundproofed, cutting off the thumping bass of the club below. It was a minimalist space, black leather, chrome, and a view of the Gangnam skyline. Seo Jun sat behind his mahogany desk. The whiskey was gone. In front of him lay a thick manila folder. He opened it. Amelia Williams, age 24, nationality Nigerian, visa status, work permit renewable in 3 months. His fingers traced the edges of her passport photo. Even in the stark lighting of an ID picture, she was breathtaking. Her lips were full, her eyes sharp and intelligent. He turned the page. Current address, a small apartment in Itaewon. Rent is 2 weeks late. Medical history, clean, allergic to penicillin. Next of kin, mother Lagos. Seo Jun absorbed the data, filing it away in his mind alongside the names of his enemies and his bank accounts. Then, he reached the final page. A photo of a man. Tall, dreadlocks, wearing a loose t-shirt and a grin that Seo Jun wanted to cut off his face. Patrick Campbell, Jamaican, unemployed, frequent gambling debts. Seo Jun sneered. This was the competition, a boy who couldn't even pay for his woman's dinner. It was an insult. He closed the file with a heavy thud. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the quiet room. He looked at his hand, tracing the black ink of the dragon that curled around his wrist and up his forearm. He had been patient. He had been a silent observer for 6 months, letting the anticipation build, savoring the hunger. But Seo Jun was a greedy man, and he was done waiting. He pressed the intercom button on his desk. "Kai," he commanded, his voice devoid of warmth. "Tell Mr. Bong I want table 1 opened, and tell him exactly who is to serve me." The music in the club had shifted to a deeper, thrumming house beat. Amelia was wiping down a spilled martini on the main floor when Mr. Bong appeared beside her. He looked like a man who had just seen a ghost, pale, sweating, and trembling slightly. "Amelia," he hissed, grabbing her arm. "Leave this, go upstairs. The VVIP section needs service." Amelia frowned, pulling her arm back. "Mr. Bong, you know my contract. I work the main floor. I don't go up to the VVIP decks. The tips are shared up there and the men are," she trailed off, not wanting to say handsy. "Forget the contract," Bong squeaked, his eyes darting toward the dark staircase guarded by security. "We are short-staffed. You go up now. Table 3 is demanding service and the big boss, the owner, he wants the section perfect." Amelia hesitated. She had never been allowed up there. The VVIP section was legendary, a place where the laws of Seoul didn't seem to apply. "I'm not doing it," she said firmly. "Get Minjai to do it." "Minjai is sick," Bong lied, desperate. "If you don't go up there right now, Amelia, don't bother coming back tomorrow. You're fired." The threat hung in the air. Amelia thought of the overdue rent notice on her kitchen counter. She thought of Patrick asking to borrow money for investment opportunities again. She clenched her jaw. "Fine," she snapped. She straightened her uniform, smoothed her hair, and picked up a fresh tray. "But if anyone touches me, I'm walking out." Mr. Bong didn't answer. He just looked relieved she was moving. He knew something she didn't. You didn't say no to the dragon. The VVIP floor was a different world. The air was cooler, filtered and scented with sandalwood. The lighting was dim, casting long shadows over velvet booths where men in $1,000 suits whispered over bottles of cognac that cost more than Amelia made in a year. Amelia kept her eyes forward, her posture rigid. She approached table 3. It was occupied by 4 men, already loud and drunk. In the center sat Cha-min, the son of a prominent assemblyman. He was known in the tabloids for crashing cars and paying off victims. "Whiskey, leave the bottle," Cha-min slurred as Amelia approached. She set the tray down efficiently. "Enjoy your evening, gentlemen." She turned to leave, but a hand shot out and clamped around her wrist. It was tight, wet with condensation from his glass. "Wait," Cha-min sneered, looking her up and down. His gaze lingered on her skin with a mix of fascination and disgust. "I've never seen a waitress like you here. You're very dark." His friends snickered. Amelia tried to pull her hand back, but he squeezed harder. "Please let go of me, sir." "Don't be rude," Cha-min laughed, yanking her arm. "My father pays the police chief's salary. I can buy you how much for an hour? Come sit." He pulled her off balance. Amelia stumbled, dropping the tray. The crash of glass shattering silenced the room. "Look what you did," Cha-min yelled, his face twisting into ugly rage. He stood up, towering over her, raising his hand as if to strike her. "You stupid bee." Amelia flinched, bracing for the blow. It never came. A shadow moved, faster than anything she had ever seen. One moment Cha-min was screaming. The next, a massive hand wrapped around his throat, lifting him off his feet. It wasn't Seo Jun. It was the man from the door, Kai, the giant in the suit. He held the struggling politician's son in the air with one hand, his expression completely bored. "Put him down," a voice commanded from the darkness behind them. The voice was low, smooth, and terrified everyone in the room. Kai dropped Cha-min. The spoiled air fell to the floor, coughing and gasping. He looked up, ready to scream, but then he saw who had spoken. Seo Jun stepped out of the shadows of the neighboring booth. He held a lit cigarette, the smoke curling around his fingers. He didn't look at Cha-min. He looked only at Amelia. His eyes were terrifying, void of light, yet burning with an intensity that made Amelia's knees weak. "Get out," Seo Jun said softly to Cha-min, "before I cut off the hand that touched her." Cha-min went pale. He scrambled up, abandoning his friends and his expensive whiskey, and ran toward the exit. The VVIP section was deadly silent. Seo Jun walked toward Amelia. He moved with the grace of a panther. He stopped inches from her, invading her personal space. He smelled of expensive tobacco and danger. He reached out. Amelia flinched again, expecting pain. But Seo Jun only took her hand, the one Cha-min had grabbed. He inspected the red marks forming on her wrist with a clinical, cold fury. He turned to Kai, "Bring ice and clear the floor." Then he looked back at Amelia, his thumb brushing over her pulse. "You are clumsy," he whispered, though his touch was surprisingly gentle. "Come with me." Amelia allowed herself to be led away from the shattered glass and the staring eyes. Seo Jun didn't let go of her hand until they reached a secluded booth at the very edge of the balcony, shielded by heavy velvet curtains. He sat down on the leather sofa and gestured for her to sit. It wasn't a request. Amelia sat, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Kai appeared silently, placing a bowl of ice and a clean cloth on the table before vanishing again. Seo Jun picked up the cloth, dipped it in the ice and reached for her wrist. His hands were large, rough-skinned, and covered in tattoos that disappeared under his shirt cuffs. "You should not have been up here," he said, his voice flat. He pressed the cold cloth against the red marks Charmin had left. "My boss forced me," Amelia defended herself, though her voice shook. "I didn't want to come." Seo Jun looked up. Up close his face was devastating. High cheekbones, a sharp jawline and eyes that were so dark they looked like ink. There was no kindness in them, only a terrifying focus. "Bong is a fool," Seo Jun murmured. "He will be dealt with." "Please don't hurt him," Amelia said instinctively. She didn't like Bong, but she didn't want violence on her conscience. Seo Jun stopped. He held her wrist suspended in the air. A corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile, but sharper. "You worry about the man who threw you to the wolves. You are too soft for this city, Amelia." Hearing her name on his tongue sent a shiver down her spine. "How do you know my name?" He didn't answer. He dried her wrist gently, then released her. The loss of his touch left a strange coldness on her skin. "Go," he commanded, leaning back into the shadows. "And be more careful. Next time I might not be in the mood to save you." The next night, the atmosphere in the Velvet Lounge had shifted. When Amelia walked in for her shift, Mr. Bong practically bowed to her. He was pale, sweating profusely and sporting a fresh bandage on his finger. He didn't bark orders. He didn't yell. He simply pointed her toward the safest station on the floor, far away from the rowdy crowds. "VIPs are off limits for you," Bong stammered, avoiding her eyes. "Strict orders from above." Amelia worked in a daze. She felt different, exposed. Every time she poured a drink or wiped a table, she felt a weight pressing on the back of her neck. She knew without looking up that he was there. "Seo Jun." She risked a glance toward the balcony. The curtains were drawn back slightly. He was there, a silhouette against the dim light, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He wasn't looking at the dancers or the politicians. He was looking directly at her. It wasn't a look of lust, it was heavier than that. It felt like ownership. Amelia shivered, turning back to her customers. She told herself she should be scared. This was the Mafia. These were dangerous men. But beneath the fear there was a confusing, electric hum in her blood. For the first time in this massive, foreign city, she didn't feel invisible. She felt seen. And that was the most dangerous feeling of all. Amelia unlocked the door to her small apartment, exhausted. The clock read 4 a.m. The living room smelled of stale weed and instant noodles. Patrick was on the couch, the blue light of the TV flickering over his face as he mashed buttons on a controller. He didn't look up when she entered. "Hey," he muttered, eyes glued to the game. "You're late." Amelia dropped her bag, the adrenaline from the club finally crashing into fatigue. "I had a rough night, Patrick. A customer grabbed me." "Serious?" Patrick didn't pause the game. "Man, that sucks. You should just quit, babe. Place is toxic." Amelia stared at the back of his head, incredulous. "Quit and pay rent how? You haven't had a gig in 2 months." Patrick sighed, finally pausing the game. He turned around, giving her that lopsided, charming grin that used to make her knees weak. Now it just looked childish. "Relax, Amy. I got some prospects lined up, big things. Just need a little more time." He reached out to pull her in for a hug, but Amelia stepped back. She couldn't help but compare him to the man she had met the night before. Seo Jun hadn't smiled. He hadn't offered empty platitudes. He had broken a man's grip and iced her bruises with the focus of a surgeon. Patrick's hands felt soft, weak. "I'm going to bed," Amelia said quietly. "Suit yourself," Patrick shrugged, turning back to the screen. "Love you." Amelia closed the bedroom door, feeling more alone than she had at the club. Patrick was right there, but he couldn't protect her. He didn't even realize she needed protecting. But the dragon did. The Seoul afternoon was grey and drizzly. Amelia pulled her coat tighter around herself as she walked back from the market, carrying bags of groceries. Patrick had promised to go, but he was busy sleeping in, so here she was. A sleek black limousine slowed to a crawl beside her, its tires hissing on the wet pavement. Amelia ignored it, walking faster. The rear window rolled down with a soft mechanical whir. "Get in." The voice was unmistakable, deep, calm, and leaving no room for argument. Amelia froze. She bent down to look inside. Seo Jun sat in the back wearing a grey charcoal suit, a tablet in his hand. He looked like royalty surveying his kingdom. "I have groceries," she said, a stupid excuse, but her heart was racing. "Kai will take them," Seo Jun said, not looking up from his screen. Before she could protest, the driver's door opened. Kai stepped out, took the bags from her hands with polite efficiency and placed them in the trunk. He held the rear door open for her. Amelia hesitated on the curb. Getting into a Mafia boss's car was insane. But the way Seo Jun waited, still patient, inevitable, made her feel like running was useless. She slid into the leather seat. The door shut with a heavy thud, sealing out the noise of the city. The car smelled of cedarwood and cold air. Seo Jun finally turned to look at her. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small porcelain jar. He held it out. "For the wrist," he said. "Traditional medicine, better than the pharmacy trash." Amelia took the jar, her fingers brushing his. His skin was warm. "You didn't have to do this," she said quietly. "I do what I want," Seo Jun replied. He leaned back, studying her profile. "Why are you walking? Where is the boyfriend?" Amelia stiffened. "Patrick is resting." "Resting," Seo Jun repeated the word like it was a joke. "While you carry food for him, he is a parasite, Amelia." "Don't call him that," she snapped, turning to face him. "You don't know him, he's just going through a hard time, he's an artist." "He is a gambler," Seo Jun corrected her, his voice devoid of emotion. "And a coward. A man who lets his woman walk in the rain while he sleeps is not a man, he is a child." "He loves me," Amelia argued, though the words felt hollow even to her own ears. Seo Jun laughed. It was a dark, dry sound. "Love is protection, love is provision. If he loved you, he would burn the world to keep you warm. Instead, he lets you serve drinks to wolves." He moved closer, sliding across the leather seat. The air in the car suddenly felt very thin. "He is weak," Seo Jun whispered, his eyes locking onto hers. "And I despise wasted potential." Amelia's breath hitched. He was too close. She could see the faint outline of the tattoos creeping up his neck, peeking out from his collar. "Stop seeing him," Seo Jun commanded. It wasn't a suggestion, it was an order. Amelia felt a flash of rebellion. "You can't tell me who to date. You're my boss's boss, not my father. Patrick might have his faults, but he's mine." Seo Jun's gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. The hunger in his expression was naked now, terrifying and intoxicating. He reached out, his hand wrapping around the back of her neck. He didn't squeeze, he just held her there, thumb stroking the sensitive skin behind her ear. "You misunderstand," he murmured, his voice dropping to a gravelly growl that vibrated in her chest. "I have decided that I want you, and I do not share." "I'm not an object," Amelia whispered, her voice trembling. Seo Jun smirked, a dangerous, predatory curve of his lips. "No, you are a feast, and I am starving." He leaned in until his lips were almost brushing hers. She could feel the heat radiating off him. "Break it off with him," he breathed against her mouth. "I don't share my food, I am a very greedy bad boy." The air in the limousine crackled with tension, heavy and suffocating. Seo Jun's words hung between them, arrogant and possessive. Amelia shoved his chest. It was like pushing a granite wall, but the surprise of it made him lean back slightly. "I am not your food," she snapped, her eyes flashing with anger. "And I'm not a prize to be won or a pet to be kept. You don't own me." She fumbled for the door handle, her heart hammering against her ribs so hard she thought he might hear it. She expected him to stop her. She expected the doors to lock or his hand to grab her hair. But Seo Jun didn't move. He simply watched her, his expression unreadable, his dark eyes glittering with something that looked disturbingly like amusement. "Open the door," she demanded to Kai, who was watching via the rearview mirror. Seo Jun gave a barely perceptible nod. The lock clicked. Amelia scrambled out of the car, the cool, damp air of Seoul hitting her flushed face. She grabbed her grocery bags from the trunk before Kai could help and marched away without looking back. Inside the limo, Seo Jun watched her storm off, her hips swaying with indignation. He brought his fingers to his lips, tracing the spot where his breath had mingled with hers. She has claws, Kai noted from the front seat. Good, Seo Jun murmured, a dark smile ghosting his lips. I hate an easy meal. 2 days later, the chaos began. Amelia was getting ready for her shift when Patrick burst into the apartment looking frantic. His dreads were messy, and he was sweating. They fired me, Amy, they just fired me, he yelled, packing the tiny living room. Amelia paused, her mascara wand midair. What, why? I thought the DJ gig was solid. The club owner said the investors wanted a change. No warning, nothing. Patrick kicked the sofa. And then I get an email from immigration. My visa renewal is flagged for additional review. They're talking about deportation if I don't show proof of funds in 48 hours. Amelia's stomach dropped, Seo Jun. She didn't say anything to Patrick. She finished getting dressed, her hands shaking, and went straight to work. She found Mr. Bong in the back office counting cash. Does he own the immigration office too? She asked bluntly. Mr. Bong jumped, dropping a stack of bills. He looked at her with wide, terrified eyes. Amelia, don't speak his name so loudly. Does he? She pressed. The dragon has hands everywhere, Bong whispered, wiping his forehead. If he wants a door closed, it slams shut. If he wants a person gone, they vanish. You are fighting a storm with an umbrella, girl, just do what he wants. The music at the Velvet Lounge was a thumping bass that vibrated through the floorboards. Amelia tried to stay in the shadows of the main bar, but she knew it was pointless. The summons came at midnight. Table 1, a security guard grunted, blocking her path. He wants a refill. Amelia walked up the stairs, her legs feeling like lead. The VVIP curtain was pulled back. Seo Jun was there, surrounded by his usual guards but seated alone. He looked like a king on a throne of black leather. He didn't speak as she approached. He simply tapped the empty crystal glass in front of him. Amelia picked up the bottle of rare scotch. Her hand trembled slightly as she poured the amber liquid. She could feel the heat of his body, smell the sharp scent of his cologne. Is this how it works? She whispered, not looking at him. You ruin people's lives because you're bored. Seo Jun reached out, his hand covering hers on the bottle. He stopped her pouring. His grip was warm and firm. I am tidying up your mess, he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear over the music. You needed a push. He took the glass from her, his fingers lingering on her skin. Check his pockets when you get home, Seo Jun said, taking a slow sip, his eyes never leaving hers. He has a flight booked for Kingston tomorrow morning, one way. He didn't even tell you, did he? Amelia froze. He wouldn't leave me, she breathed. Seo Jun smirked into his glass. Go home and see. Amelia didn't finish her shift. She ran out of the back exit of the Velvet Lounge, her heels clacking frantically against the pavement as she hailed a taxi. Her heart was in her throat. He wouldn't, Patrick wouldn't. She burst into their apartment, the door banging against the wall. The living room was a disaster zone of clothes and open bags. Patrick was there, zipping up a large suitcase. He froze when he saw her, guilt written all over his face. You're leaving, Amelia gasped, breathless, tonight. Patrick didn't look at her. He shoved a pair of sneakers into a duffel bag. I have to, Amy. 2 guys came to the door an hour ago. They didn't touch me, but they suggested it would be healthy for me to leave immediately. They offered to pay for the ticket. And you just took it, Amelia screamed, tears stinging her eyes. You didn't call me, you were just going to vanish. I can't fight these people, Patrick yelled back, finally looking at her. Fear made his eyes wide and ugly. I'm not like you, Amelia, I can't handle this pressure. We're done, I'm sorry, but I have to look out for myself. He grabbed his bags and pushed past her. He didn't hug her goodbye. He didn't apologize for the months of rent she'd paid or the food she'd bought. He just ran. Amelia stood in the open doorway, watching the taxi swallow him up. She felt a hollowness in her chest where her heart used to be. But beneath the sadness, a cold, hard rage began to crystallize. Seo Jun had won. The rage carried her all the way back to Gangnam. She didn't change out of her uniform. She didn't check her makeup. She marched past the bouncers at the Velvet Lounge with a look so murderous that they stepped aside without a word. She stormed up the stairs to the VVIP section. Seo Jun was where she had left him, surrounded by 3 of his lieutenants. He looked up as she approached, his expression impassive. Amelia didn't stop until she was right in front of him. Smack! The sound of her hand connecting with his cheek echoed through the balcony. The music seemed to stop. The three lieutenants were on their feet instantly, hands reaching inside their jackets for weapons. The air turned deadly. Stop, Seo Jun commanded. He didn't flinch. He didn't touch his cheek, though a red mark was already blooming on his pale skin. He raised a hand to halt his men. He looked at Amelia. Her chest was heaving, tears streaming down her face, her eyes burning with hatred. You ruined everything, she screamed. You forced him out, you manipulated his life just to get what you want. Seo Jun slowly stood up. He towered over her, radiating power. He wasn't angry. If anything, his dark eyes were shining with satisfaction. I did, he admitted calmly, and now you are finally free. Free, Amelia laughed bitterly. I'm alone, you think that makes me yours. I think you are blind, Seo Jun countered. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the dossier, the same one he had studied in his office. He tossed it onto the table between them. It slid across the glass surface, stopping at her fingertips. Read it. Amelia hesitated, then grabbed the folder. She flipped it open. It wasn't just immigration papers. There were photos, grainy, surveillance-style photos of Patrick. Patrick with a blonde tourist in a hotel bar. Patrick kissing another woman in a club in Hongdae. And then bank statements. Transfer from Amelia W. Rent. Withdrawal Casino 7 Luck. She stared at the numbers. He hadn't been using her money for rent. He had been gambling it away while she worked double shifts. He had been cheating on her for months. I didn't just scare him off, Amelia, Seo Jun said, his voice dropping to a low, intimate rumble. He stepped closer, crowding her against the table. I exposed him. He took the ticket because he knew if he stayed you would find out what a leech he truly was. Amelia dropped the folder. Her hands were shaking. The anger drained out of her, leaving her feeling dizzy and exposed. Patrick wasn't a victim. He was a liar, and the monster standing in front of her. The monster had actually protected her. Seo Jun reached out, his thumb grazing the tear track on her cheek. I told you, he whispered, his eyes dark with hunger. I am greedy, but I take care of what is mine. The revelation about Patrick left Amelia unmoored, standing in the middle of the VVIP lounge with her world fractured. The anger that had fueled her was gone, replaced by a dizzying cocktail of shock and a strange, magnetic pull toward the man standing before her. Seo Jun didn't give her time to think. He took her hand, the same hand that had slapped him moments ago, and pulled her toward the private elevator at the back of the balcony. Where are we going? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Up, he said, away from the noise. The elevator ride was silent, charged with electricity. When the doors slid open, they stepped into a penthouse that spanned the entire top floor. It was a fortress of glass and dark wood, overlooking the glittering expanse of Seoul. Seo Jun led her to the center of the room and stopped. He turned to face her, his eyes traveling over her uniform, stripping it away with his gaze. You are done serving others, he growled. He stepped closer, his hands framing her face, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. Tonight you serve only me. He kissed her then, not gently but with a starving intensity. It was a kiss of possession, tasting of whiskey and danger. Amelia melted into it. After the betrayal she had just suffered, being wanted this fiercely felt like a drug. She wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer. Seo Jun shrugged off his jacket and unbuttoned his shirt. As the fabric fell away, Amelia gasped. His chest and arms were a canvas of ink, intricate dragons and smoke weaving across his pale skin, scars mapping a life of violence. He looked terrifying, a beautiful monster. He picked her up effortlessly, carrying her to the massive bed that dominated the room. I told you I was greedy, he murmured against her skin, his hands worshipping the curves of her body, the contrast of his tattooed hands against her dark skin stark and erotic. I want everything, your anger, your loyalty, your body, all of it. For the first time in her life, Amelia stopped fighting. She let the dragon devour her. Amelia woke to the smell of strong coffee and the brightness of the morning sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. Then, the scent of cedarwood and the heavy silk sheets brought the memories of the night rushing back. She sat up, clutching the sheet to her chest. The room was empty, but a tray of breakfast, fruit, pastries and coffee sat on the bedside table. The door opened and Seo Jun walked in. He was dressed in fresh trousers and a crisp white shirt, cuffs rolled up to reveal the ink on his forearms. He looked fresh, alert, and painfully handsome. "Eat," he said, walking over to the bed. "I need to go home," Amelia said, though the words lacked conviction. "I have a shift tonight, and my apartment." Seo Jun sat on the edge of the bed, trapping her between his body and the headboard. "You don't have a shift. You resigned last night." "I did." "Mr. Bong accepted your resignation immediately," Seo Jun said dryly. "And your apartment. My men are moving your things here as we speak." Amelia's eyes widened. "You can't just move me in. I didn't agree to this." "You are not safe out there, Amelia. Patrick left you vulnerable, and after last night," his eyes darkened, dropping to her lips, "I am not letting you out of my sight. You belong to the owner now." It was a trap, a beautiful, luxurious golden cage. Amelia looked at the breakfast tray, then at the man who looked at her as if she were the only woman in the world. She should be furious. She should run. But the thought of going back to her empty, cold apartment felt impossible. She picked up a strawberry. "I hate instant coffee," she tested. Seo Jun smirked. "Then I will buy you an espresso machine worth more than your old building." The domestic bubble lasted for 3 days. Amelia spent her time exploring the penthouse, wearing Seo Jun's shirts while he worked from his office downstairs. It was a strange, suspended reality. On the 4th night, the illusion shattered. Amelia was in the living room, reading a book, when the alarms blared, a harsh mechanical shriek that cut through the silence. Suddenly, the elevator doors pinged open. It wasn't Seo Jun. Kai stumbled out, blood streaming down the side of his face, his suit jacket torn. "Miss Amelia, get down," he roared, drawing a gun. Before Amelia could move, the glass wall of the penthouse, bulletproof but not indestructible, shuddered under a heavy impact. A spiderweb of cracks bloomed across the view of the city. Downstairs, muffled explosions rocked the building. The floor beneath her feet vibrated. "What is happening?" Amelia screamed, dropping to the floor behind the heavy sofa. "Retaliation," Kai grunted, firing a shot toward the service stairs as a shadow moved there. Charmin's father. He didn't like that the boss embarrassed his son. They hired the triads. The realization hit her like a punch. This wasn't just a romance, this was war. And she was right in the center of the battlefield. The service door burst open. 2 men in masks rushed in. Kai took one down, but the other lunged over the couch, grabbing Amelia by her hair. "Got her," the attacker yelled into a radio. Amelia screamed, clawing at his hands, but he was too strong. He dragged her toward the shattered window. Then a gunshot rang out, louder than the others. The man holding her went limp, dead before he hit the floor. Seo Jun stood in the doorway. He wasn't the lover from the morning, he was the dragon. His shirt was soaked in blood, not his own, and his face was a mask of pure, unadulterated demon rage. Seo Jun stepped over the body of the man he had just killed without even looking down. His face was splattered with red, his eyes black voids of adrenaline and calculated violence. He didn't look human. He looked like the dragon inked onto his skin come to life. He moved toward Amelia, the gun in his hand still raised, scanning the room for more threats. "Amelia," he barked, his voice rough and unrecognizable, "stand up." She scrambled to her feet, shaking uncontrollably. She looked at the blood on his white shirt, at the carnage in her living room. This wasn't the romance of the last 3 days. This was the reality of who he was, a killer, a kingpin, a monster. Seo Jun reached her, grabbing her shoulders. His grip was bruising. "Did they touch you?" I'm okay," she stammered, staring at the gun in his hand. He saw her fear. For a split second something painful flashed in his eyes, regret, then the mask slammed back down. "Kai," he roared over his shoulder. Kai groaned from the floor, clutching his bleeding head but giving a thumbs up. "Perimeter is secure, boss. The rest of them are dead in the lobby." Seo Jun nodded. He looked back at Amelia. He didn't hug her. He didn't comfort her. He wiped a spot of blood from her cheek with his thumb, leaving a smear of red against her dark skin. "Go to the bedroom," he ordered coldly. "Lock the door, don't come out until I say." He turned his back on her, reloading his weapon with a metallic click, ready to finish the war he had started. It took 3 hours for the silence to return. The police never came. Seo Jun owned them too. Instead, a cleaning crew arrived, scrubbing the blood from the floors and replacing the shattered glass as if nothing had happened. Amelia sat on the edge of the bed, her hands clasped. Finally, the door opened. Seo Jun walked in. He had showered and changed into fresh black clothes, but he looked exhausted. The fire in his eyes had dimmed to a weary smoulder. He walked to the safe in the wall, punched in a code and pulled out a thick envelope. He tossed it onto the bed beside her. "What is this?" Amelia asked softly. "A passport, a new identity, and enough money to live like a queen in Paris, London, or Lagos. Your choice," Seo Jun said. He stood by the window, looking out at the city lights, refusing to look at her. "You're kicking me out." "I am giving you an exit," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "You saw what happened today. That is my life, Amelia, blood, enemies, constant threat. I was selfish to bring you into it. I thought I could keep you in a bubble, but the glass always breaks." He finally turned to her. He looked lonely. "Take the ticket, leave tonight. Go find a man who can give you peace, because I can only give you the world, and the war that comes with it." Amelia looked at the envelope. It was heavy, it was freedom, it was safety. It was everything a rational person would choose. She thought about her life before him, the struggle, the loneliness, the betrayal by Patrick. Then she looked at Seo Jun, the man who had watched her for 6 months, the man who had destroyed her enemies, the man who stood alone against an army to keep her safe. She stood up, she picked up the envelope. Seo Jun flinched, closing his eyes as if bracing for a physical blow. Amelia ripped the envelope in half, then in half again. She let the pieces flutter to the floor like expensive confetti. Seo Jun's eyes snapped open. "Amelia." "I don't want peace," she said, walking toward him. "Peace is boring, and I don't want another man." She stopped in front of him. His shirt was unbuttoned at the top. She reached out, placing her hand flat against his chest, right over the head of the dragon tattoo. She could feel his heart hammering beneath the ink. "You said you were greedy," she whispered, looking up into his stunned eyes. "You said you don't share. Well, I'm greedy too. I want the bad boy, I want the dragon." Seo Jun let out a ragged breath, as if he had been holding it for hours. He wrapped his arms around her, crushing her to his chest, burying his face in her neck. "There is no turning back," he warned, his voice vibrating against her skin. "I know," she replied, kissing the tattoo on his chest. "I'm home." The line outside the velvet lounge wrapped around the block. It was the coldest night of the year in Seoul, but the people waited, desperate to get into the city's most exclusive kingdom. Inside, the music was pounding, the lights were low, and the champagne was flowing. But all eyes were on the VVIP balcony. Amelia sat in the center booth. She wasn't wearing a uniform anymore. She was draped in emerald silk that hugged her curves, diamonds glittering at her throat and wrists. She looked regal, commanding, and utterly at ease. Mr. Bong, still the manager but now trembling with respect rather than fear, placed a bottle of the club's rarest vintage on the table. "For you, madame," he bowed low. Amelia nodded, dismissing him with a wave of her hand. Seo Jun slid into the booth beside her. He looked dangerous as ever in his black suit, his hand resting possessively on her thigh. The city knew her now not as the waitress, but as the dragon's queen. No one dared to look at her with disrespect. Seo Jun leaned in close, ignoring the crowd below them. He kissed her shoulder, his lips lingering on her dark skin. "Happy anniversary," he murmured against her ear. 6 months since I finally caught you." Amelia smiled, turning to face him. She traced the line of his jaw. "You didn't catch me, Seo Jun, I let you win." He chuckled, a dark, rich sound that made her toes curl. His eyes dropped to her lips, burning with that familiar, bottomless intensity. "Are you tired?" he asked. "Do you want to go home?" Amelia shook her head, picking up her glass. She looked at him through her lashes. "Not yet," she whispered. "I'm still hungry." Seo Jun grinned, the dragon waking up behind his eyes. "Good," he said, pulling her close, "because the feast never ends."